Welcome everyone to our Zoom party for the new Smart Teaching, Stronger Learning book. I'm so excited to share this with you. We've got the authors here with us as well. This is very informal. We're going to go around and just hear a bit from each author, who they are, what they wrote about, and one of their favorite strategies. Now, as I've mentioned in my newsletter and online and social media, we're all teachers. This is a book by teachers for teachers, with teachers who are also learning experts and researchers. And that's really important to us, as well as this being incredibly short. As teachers, like, short is really nice. So I hope you enjoyed that. Each chapter is only 10 pages. So we'll go ahead and start with, how about Veronica Yan. Dr. Yan is an associate professor at the University of Texas in Austin. She wrote the chapter on interleaving. So Dr. Yan, welcome. Tell us about you and your research.
Hi, I am at Austin, as Pooja mentioned. So my research and the chapter that I wrote about was really about mixing things up for learning. So oftentimes we have this really strong intuition that to really learn something well, you have to do things one thing at a time. And yet it turns out that the evidence shows that because the way we need to use our knowledge and the way we need to use our skills in the real world requires that you're able to flexibly, fluidly draw upon different things. And so actually, to practice, we want to practice that fluid going back and forth between different things, knowing how to, and that really helps know how to integrate the knowledge, make it really flexible and usable. So my chapter is all about practicing things in a mixed up order. This is something where it's really something you have to build in intentionally, because all of our, like, the created homework assignments out there, the way our books are written, the way curriculum is written is very one thing at a time. So this is a thing that really excites me. And one of the ways I do this in my class is I'm constantly trying to pause and get students to retrieve, like, what are all the ways in which this reminds you of anything else that we've done in this course. So a lot of, like, making very explicit connections that are in our heads as teachers, but we know that it's really hard to get those into our students' heads. So that's my fun. Should we popcorn?
Sure, let's
Pass it
do
on.
that. Thanks, Dr. Yan.
I will popcorn it then to Cindy.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I am the Director of Learning Services at St. Louis University School of Medicine. I've been teaching in higher ed in a billion different ways for a while now. We don't need to say how long. My chapter in the book is about an effective teaching cycle. And so it's this idea that we all know student motivation is sorry, this is my dog Bailey. I just got home, and so she's in my lap. We all know, like, student motivation is important. And so it starts with talking about the science of motivation and the things that we can do. So making sure that students understand the value in the work that we're doing, making sure that we increase their self-efficacy appropriately so they feel competent to do work, etc. And then from there, then we've got them motivated and engaged, and they're in the classroom. And so I talk about scaffolding and appropriate techniques to use for different levels of students, right? Novices tend to do better with direct instruction, whereas experts tend to do better with some more problem-based or inquiry-based approaches. So kind of talking about that. And then once we've done that good work, then we need to reinforce it. And so that comes into spaced retrieval practice, which other folks in the room have in the book as well. And all of that, if done really well, leads to higher self-efficacy, which leads to higher motivation, right? So it's kind of becomes this cycle that if we can do a good job of that reinforcement, then we can lead to motivation again, and everything just keeps getting better. Yes, and then thank you, Pooja. I was going to say that too, and then I also work with a group called the Learning Scientists, and so you can see that link in there too, where we just try to get information into the hands of educators. So yeah. Okay, and I'm going to popcorn. All right, I'm going to popcorn over to Roberta.
Hi, thank you, Cynthia. Well, my name is Roberta. I'm from Brazil, and I teach psychology, educational psychology for undergrad students, and I also work in the orienting, advising master and PhD students, candidates to their PhD. And my chapter is about understanding neuromyths in education empowers educators to stop and wasting resources like time and money on educational fads. Instead, they can focus on investing in all the 9 evidence-based strategies covered in this book in the 90 previous chapters. So that's it. So I'm going to popcorn at Dr. Michelle.
Yeah, thanks, Roberta. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Michelle Rivers. I'm in my first year as an assistant professor at Santa Clara University in the Bay Area. But actually, I've been in education kind of my whole life since my mom would take me to she works in healthcare, and she would take me to her lectures that she would do for folks and put me in a room where there was a whiteboard. And I just remember loving drawing on the whiteboard, which kind of started my educational journey there. I've also worked in hands-on science education where we got to play with dry ice. I taught creative writing. I taught piano for a brief period of time, and loved learning, didn't always love school. So that's kind of what got me interested in the science of learning. And my chapter is called Bringing It Together. So it's just like 5 really simple tips to incorporate more of these effective strategies like retrieval practice or self-testing and spacing into the classroom. So for example, one way to kind of incorporate more of these retrieval processes before the class even starts is to start with a question du jour or question of the day. And it's kind of getting students excited about what material is to come. So, you know, when you go to a restaurant, you get the menu ahead of time and it gets you excited about what you're about to taste. So that's the same idea, is just getting students really curious about what's to come, not just through presenting a learning objective, but actually getting them to engage. So I might ask students in my cognitive psychology class, like, what is a mind? Is it different from a brain? How might it be the same? Or why do we remember some things for a long time and we forget other things really quickly? And students come to the class with prior knowledge that they can use to answer these questions. And even if they're wrong, that can be a helpful way to address misconceptions and then build on what they already know. So I'll leave you with that spoiler or that teaser, but I hope you read the book and see the other tips. So thanks so much. I will popcorn. I think we still have Lisa, Dr. Sun.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. This is really a lot of fun. I've never had a Zoom party before, so this is actually my first one. Congratulations, Pooja, and to everyone. I think the book is great. I haven't read all of the chapters, but you know, I've been through all of them. I think it's just so exciting and a really good book. So I'm at Barnard College. I've been there for a long time, almost 25 years now. And my chapter is on metacognition. And usually for the past whatever number of years researching metacognition, I've sort of talked about and researched sort of the general framework, which is the kind of how do you know what you know? How do you learn about your learning? You know, are we self-aware about our learning? What is monitoring? How do we control our behavior? But I think this was, and I'm really thankful to you, Pooja, but this was sort of an opportunity to talk about what I really want to talk about. It is related to metacognition, but sort of the opposite side of the coin in the sense that it's the obstacle. And what I mean by that is I talk about imposterism. So if you take sort of the simplest metacognitive framework in the classroom, one might be
that you monitor what you're learning in class or what the teacher is saying, and you might make a judgment like, oh, I'm sort of confused, or this is sort of really difficult. I'm not really sure what the teacher said. And that's a good monitoring strategy. And then a good control strategy, if you're confused, might be to then raise your hand and say, oh, could you please repeat that? Or I didn't really get that. Or, is there a different way that, I could try to think about it? And that would be a good control strategy. But I think in real life, and for me personally too, that this control strategy was very difficult. And it's really difficult because I don't want to necessarily raise my hand. I don't want to necessarily show people that I'm behind or not getting it in the classroom. And this is what we call the control sort of component of metacognition. And we've done a lot of research on this, people in the metacognitive field, like study time allocation, sort of how do we space, how do we self-test. But I think when you think about teaching in the classroom, we're talking about sort of a social control, right? When do we know when to ask a question? When do we know whether to say, I don't know? Or when do we, how do we know when to say to a teacher, wait, don't give me the answer. I want to persist on it myself. All of these things sort of are like public metacognitive strategies. So what I tried to do in my little chapter is I went through the basics of metacognition, but then I also sort of pivot to, how can we make it easier to allow people to exhibit good control strategies that often relate to these sorts of social demands, sort of like letting it all go, taking off the mask of worrying that you might not be the smartest one in the class or you might be different in some other way. So that's what I tried to do in the metacognition chapter. Nice to meet everyone. So who is left?
Thank you, Dr. Sun. We've got Dr. Carpenter and Dr. Blunt. Who would
Yep.
you like to pass it to?
Dana.
Yay. Now I know who I get to popcorn to afterwards, so that's helpful. Thanks. I'm still trying to work out how to make all the faces show up at once on Zoom, so that makes it easy for me. I also love Pooja's Zoom parties. I think it's not easy to have fun on Zoom, but Pooja can make it happen, and these are always great to attend. So this is my little dog, Pepe. He's a small little guy. He's as Pooja would say, a vintage dog. He's very old. He's about 18, and he's completely deaf. And his vision is also getting very limited by the day, but he's very happy little guy. And he's been with me almost every year that I've been in higher education. I was honestly trying to count. I think this is my 18th year as a professor. I might be off by a year. I'm not sure. I spent all of last year thinking I was 1 year older than I was. And then I found out, which is like a funny thing that you don't care about as much when you get older. Anyway, I grew up in Colorado, where I got my PhD at Colorado State in Fort Collins, and then specialized in research on learning and memory, like a lot of other folks here. My first professor job was at Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa, where the basketball team has been doing better and better all the time. I moved just last year to Corvallis, Oregon, and so I'm at Oregon State University now. And my goodness, the Pacific Northwest is absolutely beautiful. I love it here. The winters that aren't real winters, where it like rains a little bit and that's all it does, is annoying to some who've lived here forever. But I'm not walking through 3 feet of snow. And that just makes me so happy. And it's a wonderful little community, a lot of fun. The chapter that I wrote for the book has to do with spacing, which is basically taking time spent learning and dividing up that time into different chunks rather than spending the whole time one continuous chunk of time learning. I love spacing. One might say I have an unhealthy obsession with it, and I like it for the same reason I like a lot of these learning principles. Somebody said, I think Michelle, you liked learning, but you didn't like school. I couldn't have said that better myself. When I was younger, I didn't know anything about how to learn. I liked learning stuff. I always thought that if you didn't do well in school, you were just kind of limited all your life. You're either born smart or you're not. And if you're not, good luck. You're going to have a really hard time, right? There were always the smart kids. And I was like, okay, they just are that way. And I can't be that way because I'm not born that way. I don't know when the light came on, but it was learning about how to be a successful learner. For me, was just like, oh my goodness, it was life changing. It's like, you mean there's actual things that you can do to exercise your brain, so to speak, so that you can make it stronger. You can make things stick in your brain better just by engaging in certain activities. And I just kind of went nuts with that. That was just like the greatest thing ever. Spacing in particular is interesting to me because it's not intuitive. It's the idea of taking a chunk of time, let's say 3 hours. Intuitively, I would have thought, and a lot of people would think, if you spend 3 hours learning something, and you do 3 hours all at once, let's say you're learning like algebra principles or something, right? Like around middle school. And you just spend 3 whole hours and you just keep drilling and drilling and practicing, I would be like, okay, 3 hours, that's good. And you should keep doing it. You should spend those 3 hours continuously because that's the best way to get it into your brain, right? What if you took the 3 hours and you did half an hour of practice per day across 6 6 days? I had to do simple mental math really quick. Across 6 days, but only half an hour per day, right? It's the exact same amount of time. Is it better to spend the 3 hours all in one sitting, or is it better to do half an hour per day across 6 days? I erroneously would have thought that 3 hours all in one chunk would be better because then you don't forget anything, and your learning is better if you don't forget, right? I was dead wrong about that. And I think what's interesting to me is how some of these learning principles are so counterintuitive. And a lot of the reasons why students and even sometimes teachers don't use them is because they very logically think, oh, that's not going to work. No, I don't want to harm my kids' learning. I'm going to do it the best way that's going to help them. And spacing is one of those little mysteries that's like, okay, that shouldn't work, but it completely does. And there's hundreds of studies showing the half an hour per day over 6 days as an example of how to do those intervals. It can double your learning or double or better your learning compared to sitting there all in one setting and spending hours and hours doing it all at once. That's what spacing is. And it's like so simple, but there's a million different ways to do it. And the basic principle is just taking a chunk of time and breaking it up over days to where you're spending less time in any one day, but you're still getting the same amount of time, so to speak, but your learning is just so much better if you do smaller chunks of time spread across days. And there's some interesting theories, like your attention is more engaged doing smaller chunks of time across days. As you can imagine, if you try to sit there and do algebra for 3 hours, your brain checks out after who knows. And then you're trying to pay attention and you realize at some point you haven't even processed what's going on for the last hour, but you're not sure where you checked out. Like all of us go through that. So there's some real benefits to be reaped by doing smaller chunks of learning over time. It works for so many things. Pepe, when he was younger, learned so many tricks, and he can still do some of them, but we did spacing. We did small little days of practicing these things with rewards and stuff. And works with people, works with non-people, lots of benefits to education, many ways that you could implement this. And what I love about this new book is all the practical strategies that it has. So here's the principle, here's the concept, right, from the researcher who's an expert on that concept, and here's the way that you apply it. And each of these chapters is short. You can read it literally, I was gonna say on the way to work, if you walk and you're really good at not tripping, not if you drive, but you can read it in a very short amount of time. You can get the real basic fundamentals. It's very accessible, easy to read, and super valuable to use with students. So I love it, read it, you'll love it too. Okay, I am popcorning. I learned that. Okay, now I know how to say that. I'm one of the older ones here, so I have to learn new vocabulary all the time. I'm told, Janelle, I can't see her, but I'm sure you're there somewhere. So take it away, Dr. Blunt.
Hello, I am Dr. Blunt, and I am looking at all these faces of people who I think share the same passion as me. People who are passionate about teaching in the classroom and even outside of the classroom. And I love that I get to be here with you. I love learning, and whether that's helping other people learn or learning things for myself, because we're all still learning things. We go in the classroom and we come home and then we learn some new stuff. I'm learning speed climbing right now. I call it slow speed climbing because it's not very fast, but it's a thing I'm learning. I'm learning how to what I call roller hound, which is take my dog who's got too much energy, I put on rollerblades, and away we go, roller hounding. These are all things that I'm learning. I'm learning piano, and I love that I can take this book and apply it to both my classroom and my life in these short, small tips. So there are just a couple things I really love right now. It's this book, and check this out if you're watching, whiteboards. So in my section, I talk about retrieval practice, and most of you are using retrieval practice in your classroom and in your life already. And so keep doing it. That's awesome. It's powerful learning right there when you use retrieval practice. And one of the things I talk about in the book the most is whiteboards, because these whiteboards have been a game changer for me. So I'm an educational researcher, I'm a cognitive scientist, and perhaps number one is I am an educator. I am in the classroom, probably like most of you, 4 days a week teaching. And so I have shared with you here some tips that I think can help you freshen up your classrooms, that we can learn from each other, ways that you can start incorporating retrieval into your classroom, keep incorporating retrieval with minimal upstart costs. So the whiteboards for me have been really key. And I mentioned some ways that I use them in the book. So check it out for tips on how to do that. But the whiteboards are something that I have found by bringing to class really get every student engaged. Instead of asking a question, let's do a retrieval question, asking it and being met with that silence, that awkward silence, then enter anyone, Bueller. Instead, the whiteboards give people a chance to every person can retrieve. And I think that's been really awesome to see. In addition, these whiteboards come with erasers, and the erasers normalize the mistakes that people make. And so I've been asking students, what do you like about the whiteboards? Why the whiteboards? And I mean, all they have to say is usually fan mail for the whiteboards. They love the whiteboards. But when I really press them, I'm like, but why the whiteboard? They say well, it's just, I make a mistake and it goes away. The power of the eraser. And so this is something that for me, I've dove in and I've made the purchase on Amazon to get little whiteboards that I bring around to class. I bring them in a suitcase that was actually a wedding present. So thank you, Andrew, for my marriage contribution here. So I bring this suitcase with me. I wheel these things around, and it's made a big difference. Now, if you're not quite fully convinced that you want to get some whiteboards, but you want to try it, I would caution against using just paper and pencil, because that might feel like busy work to students. but there are some options that Dr. Agarwal has on her various resources: piece of paper, sheet protector, dry erase marker, whiteboard. So there's something really powerful about having the eraser that just normalizes mistakes. So those are some tips that I talk about with whiteboards. In my chapter, I've got several other ways that can maybe inspire you to use more retrieval practice in your classroom. And I encourage you guys, you guys are you're here in your free time learning more about learning. I mean, that is amazing. That's awesome. You guys are awesome educators, and just keep doing what you're doing. Thanks for your service and the work, because those of you who are K through 12, I get those after 12, and the work that you guys do sets me up really well. So thank you so much for preaching the good news about retrieval and spacing and interleaving and debunking neuromyths, and yeah, go on and practice retrieval.
Thanks, Dr. Blunt, and thank you to all the authors. Yeah, it's so amazing that we've got more than 50 people here joining us, and we'll have more later watching the recording about this cool stuff. It's just, I mean, it means so much to me, and all of these scientists are good friends of mine that I've known for 20 years. And I just wanted to mention for folks, feel free to put questions in the chat for our authors while we've got them here. This is a unique experience because for the 7, 8 of us who are authors in the book who are here on Zoom, we very rarely get together in person, all of us. I don't think all of us have been in a room together ever, but I've been in a room together with like 2 or 3 or maybe 4 out of the 7 of us. So please put your questions in the chat and take advantage of this opportunity to talk to them, because we're all busy and I also don't get to see them. So I might ask some questions, but please put some in the chat. Dr. Blunt, we have one. Do you have students take photos of their work on the whiteboards to study from later?
I don't, but they do. So that is one of the benefits, right? You might think, the eraser goes away. When students find what they've retrieved to be a valuable tool or cue for the future, they will just whip out their phones and take pictures. And I encourage them to do that if they want, but it's something they do automatically.
Thanks. I'm going to popcorn it or I don't know, kind of randomly ask questions to the authors. But again, folks, feel free to put your questions in the chat. Dr. Yan, for the interleaving chapter, you had this cool example or analogy, metaphor, I can never remember the difference, about tie-dye t-shirts. Can you tell us about interleaving and tie-dye?
Yeah, so that was a visual where I was like, I could make this as like, there is a beautiful, colorful version of this that unfortunately couldn't go in the book, but maybe I'll post it on my Blue Sky or something. But when we study things in books, and oftentimes the way curriculum is done, it's very one thing at a time. So I was almost imagining like each color is a different skill or a different concept that we use. But the exam, whether that is a paper exam that you take in school or the exam of life is more like tie-dye. It's not blocks of color, it's everything everywhere all at once. And so that was the tie-dye analogy. It's like you're not going to know what you're going to need to use when. And so life looks more like a tie-dye shirt than it does a very organized grid. Sometimes I'll use the example, so like talking about medical students, Cindy works with med students, but I also have med students in my psych of learning class, because here at UT Austin, we have this really interesting program where med students do 3 years of med school in 4. And in one of their years, they actually step out of the med program. And some of them choose to do a 2 years master's of educational psychology in just 1 year. Our med students are a different breed. But I'll say to them, like if you're going to be a GP, for example, it's not like you are going to come into the clinic on Monday and say, okay, every single person who's going to come see me today, they're all going to be having heart attacks. And then on Tuesday, I'm going to be dealing only with broken bones. And on Wednesdays, I'm only going to be dealing with respiratory issues. The world comes at you interleaved. The world is tie-dyed in that way, and you need to be able to flexibly draw upon all the knowledge that you've got stuffed in your head. Because what is the use of having it stuffed in your head if you can't get it out?
Thanks, Dr. Yan. Let's see. Dr. Carpenter, there was a question for you in the chat about a sweet spot between learning something, retrieving it. Tell us a bit about sort of optimal spacing. Does this exist? What does it look like?
I saw that. That's a really good question. So if you're going to use spacing, breaking up learning time into smaller chunks, what should the chunks be? That's a really good question. Now, the answer, this is the funny part where as psychology researchers, we often don't give like a clear, concrete answer. We say, oh, it depends. It's not frustrating though. It's actually extremely flexible. The exact time interval doesn't matter as much as space, just generally spacing it out. So you have a lot of flexibility in how you can do this, right? So let's take a concrete example. You're introducing some new concept. Let's say, I teach intro psych and I want to teach students about various psychological disorders and the differences between different bipolar disorders, different psychosis disorders, right? There's some overlapping symptoms. They have to keep these things straight. They have to learn the differences, compare and contrast. So I have all these little exercises I do where I present a scenario and they have to kind of use the this guidebook of symptoms to kind of discuss and work with a group to figure out, okay, what might this meet the criteria for? And it's hard. It's not like super straightforward. Try to make it as realistic as possible. Now, practice that a little bit on one day, right? Practice it a little bit again the next time you have class, which for me is always 2 days in between, right? I could have them do it for the entire 2 hours of class. We have 2-hour classes here, or practice it a little bit on one day. We have class again, revisit it, practice it again. You can fit spacing into any schedule, and generally, oh, I heard somebody talking, sorry. Generally, the rule of thumb is to put enough time in between something so that it's not fresh in your mind at the time you come back to it. So a day, 2 days does quite well. You don't have to worry about rearranging a whole schedule for one day to where you have to fit in multiple practice periods. You can spread it across days and it works really well to do it that way.
Thanks.
So many questions coming.
Yeah, this is great. And Dr. Carpenter, you kind of mentioned this, but what if you just have an 80-minute lecture? How do you just break that up into sort of spaced smaller lectures? We often with spacing say, do this and do that, but what does that look like logistically? If you have an 80-minute lecture, how do you turn it into a spaced retrieval or spaced lesson?
Yeah, you can within a single lesson, you can definitely incorporate spacing. One way that it can be done that I often do is to, teach a little bit about something, have an introduction to something, you kind of go into it a bit for, let's say, 20 minutes, and then throw some practice questions at them that get at something you talked about like 10 minutes ago. They're like, oh, wait, 10 minutes sounds so easy, right? You're going to be like, oh, but everybody's going to know that it's going to be so easy. No, they, don't always get it. And of course, these students are learning things for the first time. I think we often see it from our own perspective and we think, oh, this is just going to be too simple, way too easy. I have found students love spacing the most and they love practice questions the most when it was fairly recent. So they have a good chance of getting it right. And they really like to be, if we're going to talk about a sweet spot, like the question phrased it, I think that sweet spot is when they feel like they can get it right. They remember what you said 10 minutes ago. It's not like automatically there, they have to think about it a little bit, but their confidence that they can get it right is what gets them excited. And they're in that, ooh, I know this one stage. And they often do know it, but they have to think about it a little bit. So timing, even as short as 10 minutes ago, by putting some practice questions in there works really well. And if it is too easy, hey, maybe you do it and you find it's too easy, you could just say, you guys are so smart. I can't believe you're getting all these right. I'm gonna have to make this harder. And they love it when you say that. They're like, oh.
Thanks, Dr. Carpenter. With throwing things into, I and a few of us here in the book or online have mentioned just throwing in a photo of a golden retriever into your lesson slides as a way of sort of adding in spaced retrieval. So it's a cue for you and a cue for your students to retrieve and to put in a photo of a golden retriever. Yeah. And along the same lines, Tatiana Rodriguez, who has an awesome podcast, you should check out Tatiana's podcast, Tatiana Teaches. She asked, what's your favorite fast activity you can use with little or zero prep? I'm going to ask Dr. Niebel, what do you use with your students that takes little or no prep?
Brain dumps. That is the thing, right? Like, because, and it'll be like, maybe I'm just in the middle of talking to them, and you can kind of look around the room and you're like, I've lost people. Like they're no longer with me. All right, we need to just pause everything and do something. And so with no prep, like literally did not plan to do this, did not put the golden retriever in my slides. Just, okay, let's stop and do a brain dump. Tell me everything that you can just jot down right now, everything you can remember about. And then I just pick a topic, something we talked about 2 days ago, a month ago, I don't know, but it's real quick and real easy. People write things down, and then we might popcorn around the room and share like, okay, what did you write down? And then can anybody else add to that until we've got a relatively complete picture? So it's really quick brain dump, really. So that's retrieval practice, which is great. I make it spaced retrieval practice. And then we do immediate feedback on it, so everybody has the right answers. That's my like go-to real quick, no prep. I don't grade it. It's just a learning activity.
Thanks, Dr. Niebel. Dr. Blunt, how about you? What's one of your strategies that's no prep that you can toss into class?
My number 2, because brain dumps is also my number 1, is to do something just like take what you're doing and just take away the notes. So when a student's sitting out in the psych department and they're studying, I say, okay, well, I'm gonna take that book from you, okay? And you tell me, like this header here says collaborative games. That's it. I'm reading from my chapter here. How might you use collaborative games to practice retrieval? So just picking any cue and turning it into a retrieval question. So you can cast the net wide, or you can cast it pretty specific, and just making it free choice out loud, something that forces people to actually do it rather than just in their head is best success.
Thanks. Other authors we haven't heard from: Dr. Rivers, Dr. Akuni, Dr. Sun. Anything you'd like to add about a quick no prep strategy you use in your classes? We're not shy. We talk all the time, but it's still kind of awkward, right? With all these people on Zoom. Dr. Rivers, what's one of your no prep strategies to improve learning?
Sure. So multiple choice questions. We use them a lot because they're really efficient. We use them often for assessment, but of course we can use them for retrieval practice. And it's little to no prep because all you need is the question. You don't need a piece of paper. You just need students to hold up their fingers. 1 is A, 2 is B, 3 is C, 4 is D, right? And what I'll do is I'll have students hold up a finger and then go find someone with a different finger up. So someone over here has a 2, you have a 1. Go talk to them, try to convince them that you're right, hear a different perspective. And that elaboration process, I know someone asked about, well, how do we get information in, not just out, in this retrieval process in the chat? And I think that's a great question. These elaborative processes where students are pulling from their prior knowledge and making the connections and hearing different ways that things can be true or false, that's where the real learning and reflection occurs. So we're not teaching blank slates, right? Students have these ideas that they come with, these misconceptions, and that's not bad, right? Like we can use that to help strengthen connections. So explaining to other people, and if other people aren't around, they can explain to themselves. So I'll often have students on multiple choice tests explain their answers. And some research that just came out with my colleague, Dr. Overono, she's in Utah, we found that just by having students explain their answers to multiple choice questions, they're more likely to get the question correct. So you don't even have to grade those explanations. You can just have students engage in that process, and it helps them think a bit deeper about their learning.
Awesome. And Dr. Rivers' chapter with bringing it together and more teaching tips ties in really well with Dr. Sun's chapter on metacognition. And with the self-explanations in your chapter on metacognition, Dr. Sun, you also mentioned confidence judgments. and confidence ratings, which Dr. Rivers does. They're all kind of intertwined. So Dr. Sun, tell us a bit about confidence judgments and how that plays into monitoring and control and metacognition.
Yeah, no, everything I want to say or think about, a lot of it has already been said. And, a lot of these strategies are already metacognitive, and also basically metacognitive in the sense that we are trying to increase students' confidence. I think, when I'm teaching anyone from very young kids to college students, adults, and even my own kids, confidence is a real problem. And the problem, it becomes a problem because even when we say, well, do the self-testing, let's test, it's not always easy to come up with an answer, or even if students do come up with an answer, they don't want to say it out loud or they don't want to take the test. It's a very stressful situation. So I do talk about in my chapter as one of the sort of strategies is to have these safe fail opportunities, right? So like other people were saying, when they do these sort of very spontaneous, well, okay, what's the answer? Is it A, B, C, or D, right? These kinds of things, these verbal sort of self-testing strategies, I think are very good for confidence. And I also think that, in my class, I teach cognitive psychology. So it's sometimes a little bit different from something like intro. But all of the things that I teach are about experiments, a variety of experiments throughout the semester. So what I do is every time I present a theory, a hypothesis, whatever it is, I might go into the experiment a little bit, and then I'll say, what would your hypothesis be? And if students don't say anything, which sometimes that happens often at the beginning of the semester, I leave it at that. And I'm trying to suggest that not coming up with a very quick answer is okay. A semester is not the god of learning, right? The schedule that we have in education is not necessarily perfect. It's not even good sometimes, right? If we really are trying to encourage long-term learning and a confidence in having the knowledge for the long term, I think we need to both model and allow for, slow thinking. And that could mean sometimes, okay, you don't have an answer now, maybe next week we'll go over it. And to have a little bit of time where you're in the I don't know state and to show that it's okay, I think that's confidence building. And, I've started doing this over the past, I guess, 5 years only, when I've never used a multiple choice test, because I think it sometimes can decrease their confidence. It's sort of like you got to get an exact answer. So all my tests are, even if I had 200 students, all my tests are graph drawing, about the experiment. And so it's easier for me to grade, but they also are not allowed to write a sentence. And, things like that. Like I talk about, if a student's English is not their first language, we don't care about grammar, writing, and quickness of coming up. I care about think, label the axes, and put in the graphs. And I can tell that, when someone just memorized something that I eventually gave them in data, they might have the graph, the plots, but no axis labels because they just memorized it. And that is that, someone was talking before about taking pictures. And I tell the students, if you're going to take a picture of what I put on the board or what another peer has put on the board, you're definitely not likely to remember the axes. I just want you to think. So I try to encourage failure opportunities that are okay, and then bring them up to, because of course they need to get good grades. I am a realist too, but I do it slowly, leading up to the different midterms or the assessments. And I think I'm, pretty lenient at the, you need to give me an answer now. And I also talk a lot about my own failures. So that's all sort of confidence building, I think.
Thanks, Dr. Sun. We've got time for more questions. Feel free to put them in the chat. But before people drop off, I always like taking a screenshot of parties. They're just nice to have. So if you have the book, it'd be great if you could put on your video and hold them up. If you don't have the book, we love like a thumbs up or a peace sign. It's just so amazing to see people from all over the world. So I'll take a photo. If you want to look in your cameras, give us a thumbs up. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. And maybe a silly one. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Hi, Justin. That was a good thumbs up. I just see a lot of friends here. My mom is here, which is super cool. And we've got people from around the world. A few more questions that we've got some time for. And I love, yeah, it's a big hit, Dr. Sun. A semester is not the god of learning is a good way to put it. I also say the first time a student retrieves should not be on a final exam. That is not the first time we should be retrieving. That is not the first time a musician should be playing in front of a giant performance to make sure that the end of the semester, is that really assessing cramming or is that assessing learning, is something to think about. Dr. Akuni, you wrote the chapter on neuromyths. What is a neuromyth? A myth about the brain that just really is irritating, that's frustrating, that you just wish would go away. So it's sort of like, what's your favorite or most frustrating neuromyth?
I guess that two of them, the learning pyramid. I don't know how to say that in English, because in Portuguese we say the learning pyramid. Is that okay? Yes. And so people think that we learn like 5% listen and 10% reading and stuff like that. It's bullshit. I'm sorry. And another one is people believes that if we learn according to our preference, learning style preference, we will learn better. But it's not what research the research shows. So this misconception about learning style is very spread in the teacher's course. I've seen people doing courses to for educators, but they learn like those things that are not correct instead of learning retrieval practice, spacing effect, and stuff like that. So they stay learning stuff that the neuromyths that won't get the students learn better.
Thanks, Dr. Cooney. And I see a question from Justin Sorencia, who is at a fantastic school, and I recently visited his school. We're preaching to the choir. Many of you have come to this Zoom party already knowing about all of this. So Justin's wondering, what is something you can say to other folks to get them on board? How do you get other folks on board? Oh boy, okay. And to clarify, Dr. Nebel, tell us about this triangle. This is true, not true? Tell us about this
No,
triangle.
this is what she was talking about. She said the
Okay.
learning pyramid, and it's bull.
Yes, that is a huge myth. So thank you. I just want to make sure, because otherwise, if you just see
when it comes through, like, so that's what I put the words in, and then the picture comes through as a separate message, and I was like, no, those things go together.
Yeah.
Don't do that, Zoom. Don't do that to me.
And I was too slow to type in the chat, so it looks like I told Lori that it's not true, that she can't wait. What I mean is it's not true what's in that triangle picture. Yeah. Okay, so what would you tell other teachers, other educators to get them on board? Again, we're preaching in the choir. So thoughts from our authors, what do you tell teachers to get them on board with the science of learning and all of these research-based strategies? All of us do a lot of professional development. Yeah, Dr. Nebel.
So I've written on this before, but kind of maybe the most important thing is never to look at somebody and say, you're wrong. That doesn't go well. And so I think, to me, the best way to do this is to meet people where they are, right? Educators are really trying hard. It's not as if they're doing these things because they want to do bad things. Quite the opposite, right? They're doing these things because they are trying. They're using the resources that are available to them, and they are desperately trying to improve learning in their classrooms. And so I think it's important to recognize that, to make that explicit and say, I know how hard you are trying to improve learning. I know some really cool stuff that I've learned that really seems like it's helping, and I would love to share that with you. So instead of trying to unlearn the bad stuff, it's like trying to replace it with the good stuff instead. But it's meeting them in that place of like, I know you're trying to do good things. I've got some ideas of things that I've seen that seem to be really working, and that we have this great evidence base for. Can I share those things with you? It's like respectful of who they are and what they're doing, instead of trying to be like, ugh, why do you still talk about learning styles? That doesn't go over well.
I also love telling people, keep doing what you're doing, just remove the text. So right now you're rereading. Great, let's remove the book and then do that again. What do you remember? And then I'm going to give you your book back to see if you're right. And then we're going to do this again. So keep doing what you're doing. Just add the retrieval twist. Okay, keep doing it. Just put some space in between.
Raise my hand. How do I do that? I guess I'll just
Oh.
talk. I'll
Sure.
just jump
And then
in.
we've got 2 minutes left, and I saw Dr. Sun raised her hand as well. So go for it.
Oh,
Dr.
sorry.
Portuguese.
Yeah, I just like was doing it like this because I couldn't. I'll be very quick. So those 2 points I think were very good, and to point out what teachers are already doing that's very good and very effective, I think matters a lot, because here's the thing with memory. One of the things I hit on a lot is with learning and memory, our brains are so limited. We can't take in everything. What we do take in, we can't hang on to it. We forget very rapidly. And that's so normal. Everybody does. Students do, right? These reports where the public gets all crazed and panicked because, oh no, students don't remember things after summer vacation, after they come back to school. Yeah, you wouldn't either if you had to learn something and then come back, right? To talk about what we do to promote learning, not as a way of either achieving or failing to achieve learning, but instead as efforts to counteract this constantly naturally occurring process of forgetting, which is always working against us, right? You're teaching, you're doing well, the kids are learning, they're constantly forgetting also. And to just always kind of keep that perspective as a mindset for why we do what we do, and how learning works in a way we don't beat ourselves up if kids don't remember things perfectly, but to keep going and to keep using the right techniques and methods, and it's going to work, and it's going to go well.
Thanks. Dr. Sun.
Yeah, this is a very nice segue for what you just said, Shanna, that, it is about forgetting. And there's also lack of confidence because you're going to forget. And I find myself telling my students very often from the very beginning of the semester, right, that the goal actually is not for me to get you guys to learn and get A's for the test. I would love it if in 20 years you came back and you visited my office and we can still have a conversation. So I really focus on the long term. I want you to be a smart, knowledgeable, older adult. And when I talk about that, it always reminds me of Art Markman, who's at UT Austin, who used to be at Columbia. I say this so often because it was such a great thing. I tell the students at the beginning of the semester, because this is what he would tell his students, whenever a student asks, will this be on the test, right? Whenever, before anybody asks, you say to them, if you ask me, my answer will always be this. Yes, but it might not be my test. And it just makes them think about, do they want to have this knowledge forever? Or is it, okay, are they just really worried about getting an A on the test? I think it's actually been really successful for me to take what his advice was and to use it. And I see my students sort of wanting to know this information for the long term. and it sort of changes the way they're thinking, and also their stress level about being perfect in the short term. So that's just what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Dr. Sun. As we wrap up, I have put a link there, all of our book information and excerpt from the introduction. You can download some Google Docs with tips from the book, or all at retrievalpractice.org/smart teaching, with or without the hyphen. They both work. And those are links to Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can also request the book from your library. I'm all about supporting libraries and getting books for free. I really am. So please talk to your local library. Bookshop is also a great way to support your local independent bookstore. The proceeds go to a bookstore of your choice. So thank you all so much for joining. I'll stick around for a little bit if anyone has more questions. And let's give a big hand and congratulations to the authors for all of their contributions and sharing their expertise. Thanks everyone for coming to our party. Have a great rest of your day.
And big thank you to Pooja for putting this together.
My pleasure.
Thank you.